What is the most pointless station on the London Overground? How about the Elizabeth line, the DLR, or the trams? Well, you know how there's that tiny line all by itself in the corner of the tube map? Well, that is actually not where you'll find the answer. We already know that Preston Road is the most pointless underground station, but today I'll reveal its pointless brethren on London's other transport modes. Sorry, I should explain. When I say pointless here, there's no value judgment. I don't mean these stations are bad or useless. I mean, they might be, but I'll leave that to you to judge. No, I mean pointless in the BBC game show sense. These are the stations that, when prompted, the fewest people could remember. I gave 100 people 120 seconds for each mode to name as many stops and stations as they could. So which are the most forgettable? Here's a challenge. Pause the video here, write a comment with your guess for each mode, and we'll see how close you got. I'm also not going to reel off every single station, but ask me about a specific one in the comments and I'll tell you what it scored. Let's start with the Overground. There are 112 stations served by London's orange trains across 6 lines, and that asterisk will come in handy later. The most well-remembered station is Clapham Junction, named by 56 people out of 100. I mean, well remembered, not necessarily fondly remembered. In second place was Watford Junction with 47 points. I'm going to blame our writing system for that one, in the sense that you kind of start thinking in the top left, and then you work your way down. But we need to get to the bottom of this being the list. You might have thought that Havering's humble Liberty line would sit at the foot of the table, but Emerson Park, despite being the least used station on the Overground, scores a very respectable 27 points. Here's some least remembered stations on some other lines. Honor Oak Park on the Windrush scored 14 points, Kensal Green on the Lioness scored 12 points, and Stamford Hill on the Weaver scored 6 points. Now, there are no truly pointless stations. Every one was remembered by at least one person, but there are 2 stations that got the joint lowest score of 3 points each. One of them is Kentish Town West on the Mildmay line. But to find my most pointless Overground station, I've turned once again to Benjamin Chundin's Metro Memory Game data to see how many people named each station. And using that as a tiebreaker, we get Haringey Green Lanes. So of course, in a bid to boost its ailing profile, here's a completely unnecessary fan cam. But wait, remember that asterisk? The Overground has a 113th station, Battersea Park, which is served by about, 3 Overground trains a day? You won't find it on any of the maps or the Windrush line diagrams. But would you believe more people mentioned it than Kentish Town West or Haringey Green Lanes? And that's despite me explicitly saying not to mention it. But in spirit, this is the true, most pointless Overground station. Though I'm still actually just going to count Haringey Green Lanes for the purposes of this, you know. Right, onto the Overground's younger, cooler sibling. New poll, new scores. But what is the Elizabeth line's most pointless station? Slough barely comes close to being pointless. 76 people remembered it. Great news though, Station Jim is back. Even the station nobody bothered giving a proper name got 72 points. I mean, it'd be like calling me Tom Video Guy. Liverpool Street here scored highest with a massive 92 people out of 100 naming it. That's not really a surprise, it is the busiest station in the country. There are only 41 stations on the line, so the scores here are quite high compared to the other modes. In fact, only 11 Elizabeth stations were named by fewer than half of the respondents. Once again, there are no truly pointless stations here, but the least remembered stations all have something in common. They're all in East London. You'd have thought people might forget the stations beyond London, but maybe I just have a strong Berkshire contingent to my audience. The most forgettable Western Elizabeth station is Langley, which was still remembered by 42 people. But there are 6 Eastern stations less well remembered, and chiefly amongst them, Manor Park, remembered by only 23 people. In fairness, it's a very generic name, but let's treat it with the respect and, most importantly, attention it so deserves. Sticking to East London, what is the most pointless station on the DLR? Let's take it from the top. Bank is the most well-remembered DLR station, with 92 out of 100 people remembering it. Most remembered DLR and tube station, you'll never sing that. Now, if you're a clever clog / you have too much time on your hands, you might be aware that Beckton Park is the DLR's least used station. But it's pretty decently remembered. 38 people got it within the 2 minutes. What I personally find hardest about remembering DLR stations is recalling the specific combination of regal and maritime words to use. Prince Albert, Royal Wharf, Queen's Ferry. They all sound like DLR stations. None of them are. they're not. And I think that's afflicted some of the stations near the bottom of the list. Prince Regent and Royal Albert both scored 19 points each. But to find the least remembered, we need to look at the stretch of the DLR between Poplar and Stratford, which is rather unpopular. That's despite being part of the original route that opened in 1987. And about halfway up it, we find the DLR's most pointless station, Devon's Road. Only 15 out of 100 people remembered it. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. Let me make it up to you. Time to head south to the Trams, which have no pointless stations at all. Because they're stops. You have to respect the nomenclature. That's a hard word to say. The most well-known stop is Wimbledon, correctly identified by 92 with 100 respondents. Helped, no doubt, by being the only direct interchange with the London Underground. After that, it's the tram's spiritual home. East Croydon got 89 points, and West Croydon got 87. Clearly, two people just hate having to think about West Croydon. A quick shout out to Black Horse Lane, which scored 28 points. Now, two people put down Black Horse Road, which, I know exactly what you're aiming for, but I didn't count it, because Black Horse Road is 14 miles away on the Victoria and Suffragette lines. If you're the sort of nerd who knows that Avenue Road is the tram's least used stop, and I am that sort of nerd, then you might have thought it would be the least remembered stop. But no, 20 people got it, which is, very roughly, 10% of the people who use this stop each day. But right at the bottom, the most pointless tram stop goes to Belgrave Walk, remembered by only 13 people. I have no working theory for why that might be, besides random statistical noise. But you know what's come. Sorry, no, hang on. Can we just hear that sound again? How do I even make that sound? But you know what's coming. Now this really is pointless. I mean, it's a tram stop. What am I supposed to do to make it look exciting? So it turns out there are no pointless stations or stops on any of these modes, which makes the most pointless thing here me. But why is that? The no pointless stations thing, not me being pointless. Welcome to the numbers bit of the video. Quite simply, these modes all have far fewer stations than the tube, so the chance that any one gets forgotten by 100 people is much slimmer. So to compare the modes, the constant that we can use is the 2 minutes that the respondents had in each survey to remember the stations. So here is the average number of stations remembered in that 2 minutes for each mode. What a shock! Remembering tram stops is significantly harder. Now, to reiterate, this isn't a competition. I don't know who remembered what or even who responded at all. But I can still make a tip of the hat to the people who remembered the most for each mode. For the Overground, one person remembered 52 stations in 2 minutes. That's 13 more than the next highest person. For the Elizabeth line, 2 people remembered all 41 stations. And 2 people named all 39 tram stops too. Finally, 2 people named 43 out of 45 DLR stations. So close! We can do a bit of a comparison of station scores for the Overground lines. The Suffragette has comfortably the least well-remembered stations on average, which isn't much of a surprise. It's an orbital route that doesn't really go anywhere central. The Liberty scores highly because, well, let's face it, its weirdness makes it memorable. The line with the most well-known stations is the Windrush line, helped, I think, by the former East London line, which is arguably the fringe of central London nowadays. It's not been quite so relevant today, but let's also have a look back at Benjamin's Metro memory data. Firstly, there were no trams in his game, but looking at the Overground, Euston was the most remembered, whereas it was only in 3rd place in my data. And at the bottom is Southbury on the Weaver line, remembered by less than a third of the people who got Euston. In fact, of all of TfL's stations on the tube map, this is the least remembered in Ben's game. In my game, it got 7 points. On the Elizabeth line, the best known station was Paddington, which again was 3rd on my list. The least remembered was Goodmayes, remembered by just under 8,000 people. Goodmayes, bad brand recall. I'll work on that bit of the script. Finally, it won't be a surprise to hear that Bank was Ben's most well-remembered DLR station. But Langdon Park is at the bottom of the table, maybe because it was an infill station that opened 20 years after the rest of the line. There'll be more pointless surveys coming this year, so make sure you're subscribed to see the results from those as they come in. And actually, if you want to take part in one of them, there's one in the description. I'm asking what is the most pointless London borough. But be quick! I'll close the survey after the first 100 people have responded. For now though, see you soon!